They said, Jessica, why? You must get to the bottom of why is it you hate houses so much, especially ours, this big, beautiful mansion with swimming pools and everything else. And it came out so clear, my words. I said, because I lived somewhere where there are no houses, and I saw people floating all around like I was. Years later, I knew darn well I was witnessing, because I went out of my body so many times from then on. I was witnessing what it's like in between lives.
Hello, my dear friends. I'm Donald Lee, and this is Expressing and Revealing Your Truth with Donald Lee. It's a podcast in which I help you understand the truth about who you really are and how you can express and reveal that truth in the world. To do that, I interview people who have had transformational spiritual experiences, the type of experiences that many of us wish we had, but never do. Yet by learning from my guests' experiences and the wisdom they've gained from those experiences, all of us can glimpse a bigger vision of who we really are and how we can live our lives more fully, more peacefully, more lovingly. Be sure to download my free mini ebook containing 5 of the 50 parables from my popular book, The Band Director's Lessons About Life. These little parables are short, easy to read, inspire, and also help you to understand more about who you really are. There's a link in the show notes to get your free ebook. In this episode, I interviewed Jessica Taylor. Jessica fell down some stairs at age 31, hit her head, suffered a serious brain injury, and forgot everything about her life and who she was. But she also entered into another world, as it were, a spiritual world that showed her who she really was. Not a body, but a soul. This changed her whole world and eventually led to her writing 2 books about her experience and the spiritual truths she learned from it. In this fascinating interview, we hear Jessica's story, which is, as the title of her memoir states, a journey from tragedy to triumph. I'm sure you will enjoy this wonderful conversation with Jessica Taylor. Hello again, my dear friends. My guest today is Jessica Taylor. And of course, all of my guests have fascinating stories, and Jessica has a fascinating story, too, of her awakening to the reality of the spiritual world. So welcome, Jessica. It's a joy to have you.
Thank you for having me on your show.
It's my pleasure. So, Jessica, jump in. You know your story. Tell us the highlights and particularly this significant event that happened when you were a young woman.
I was 31 years old, and I'd moved from England to Canada as an immigrant and opened the Merle Norman Cosmetic Studio in Toronto area. And unfortunately, within 3 months only, I was out on business with a sales rep, and he opened a door to what I thought was on ground floor, but it was to the basement, and there was no light on. So you know, the head is the heaviest part of the body. And so, yeah, I dove down 15 stairs head first. Yeah. And my head got struck against a 12-inch steel-plated burglar-proof door at the bottom.
Ooh.
And the actually where I fell came up in an eventual court case as an illegal business. So it led to the longest civil court hearing in Ontario's history, where I was actually treated like a criminal instead of somebody who had a severe brain injury. But anyway,
and you were treated
Sorry?
And you were treated as a criminal. Why? Because you were visiting this supposedly illegal business?
The judge that my lawyer thought was to be attending that court case didn't show up, and some woman was sent to replace him, and I've never known to this day, because the lawyer passed away soon after, whether this woman was an actual, maybe her first court case as a judge or some other, I don't know what she was, but she hated my guts. Yeah, she literally disliked me. And that court drama is actually film worthy, everybody tells me, because I wrote about it in my memoir, From Tragedy to Triumph. I put the whole case out. She actually cautioned the jury to go out and rethink of the amount of money that they were going to give me, and they came back and took off like $25,000 just to please her. She saw she was like not a pretty woman. I don't like to judge people for their looks and posture and everything, but she wasn't. And she also spoke really slow, which really annoyed my lawyer on top of everything. But there was a doctor's medical report that she read where it said I had sex out of marriage after the injury. Well, for heaven's sake, it was the 90s. you know, and I think that's what I think she was a woman who never had sex in her life. I'm not too sure. But anyway, I just went off the beat there about that court drama, but it is in my memoir, From Tragedy to
Yeah.
Triumph. But the big problem was that, oh, and by to get back to that court, people with a head injury like I had should not be subjected to that kind of drama. They should not. They should have a representative other than their lawyer with them to help them know what to say. Or at one time I just turned up, looked up at the judge, and I said, "Can we stop for tea?" You don't do that in a court case. But anyway, what happened after the injury? I actually had a wig on because I was selling Merle Norman cosmetics in 1969, and as well as wigs, and my opening hours were like 10 until 10 at night, and I couldn't get to a hairdresser. So I was wearing a curly wig, and that was, because I couldn't get to the hairdresser, I couldn't do my own hair.
Right.
And when I fell, when my head struck that door, I had a 2.5-inch split across the right side of my skull with a wig on. If I had no wig on, everybody says the same thing. I wouldn't be here today. Can you imagine the impact of that steel-plated door on my skull itself
Right.
without the wig? But I still had severe brain injury. And
Right.
unfortunately, in that hospital, there was no CAT scan, no
Right.
MRI. As new immigrants to Canada, we didn't have insurance for hospital care. So in 2 weeks' time, I had to be taken out and sent home. And that's where there was more tragedy. I didn't understand anything. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my husband. I took a dislike to him. Total dislike. Didn't know my 2 daughters. Didn't know anything about life. It was like the slate was just totally wiped clean. I
Right.
knew nothing. But yet at the same time, I used to tell some people, I think I have either two heads or I'm two people. Like I was out to lunch, you could say. A term used to describe me by somebody famous one day, actually. And I had to try and walk down the stairs. Of course, stairs for years, even to this day, 60 something years later. I won't say they scare me now like they used to, but I'm extra cautious and go very slow down any kind of steps or stairs. So that's our subconscious working there. Anyway, I've documented the whole experience of my life and from tragedy to triumph, reawakening my broken brain. But I became literally a lost soul on planet Earth, and I didn't understand the metaphysical dimension that I was on. I actually related to the actions of the actor in the film Starman, who played a man from another planet, not understanding what's going on Earth and how he should talk and what his actions are and everything else. That's how I
Right.
felt. When I saw that film, I thought, oh my God, that was me all those years ago. I have to have notes, by the way. That's why you see me go like this now and again, because I can't.
That's fine.
My memory is not good at all, especially for recent call. But I was sent to England, or what? I wasn't sent to England. I was sent to California. It happened November 15, 1969, the accident, and then
Right.
I was bedridden until February, and my poor husband didn't know what to do. We slept in separate rooms, everything else, and nobody had said brain injury. And even if they had, people are not educated in brain injury anyway. They just think
Right.
you're nuts.
Yeah.
And so he thought, oh, he didn't know what to do. He just didn't know what to do. He brought in somebody to help cook and that and look after the children. Then after a while, they had to be sent out to friends in the country because he could see that my state was no good for them. I wasn't the mother that they were used to. And so anyway, he knew I had relatives in California, and he called them and said, could they look after me for a couple of weeks, which they did. And beautiful, the houses in California, beautiful big houses and swimming pools and everything else. But My hatred of houses started from the minute I left the hospital and looked at the house that we were renting. I had this fear, this dreadful fear of houses. How could anybody fear houses? So in California, my cousins knew this story. And one day, again, I wrote it in the book, what happened. They said, Jessica, why? You must get to the bottom of why is it you hate houses so much, especially ours, this big, beautiful mansion with swimming pools and everything else. And it came out so clear, my words. I said, because I lived somewhere where there are no houses. And I saw people floating all around like I was. Years later, I knew darn well I was witnessing because I went out of my body so many times from then on. I was witnessing what it's like in between lives.
Right.
That I'm 100% positive that that's what happened to me. And I'd be sitting in a chair, and then they have guests, and they're all talking around me, and I didn't understand a word of what they were talking about. And I would just cling onto the seat of the chair. I didn't know what I was doing then until I started researching spirituality and meeting people who are knowledgeable in that subject like you are. And they said, Jessica, you didn't know it, but you were grounding yourself. You were actually grounding yourself. But going to float out of my body there, and goodness knows what would have happened or where they would have put me in a psychiatric ward or something.
Right.
And then I started having these amazing experiences. When I went out of my body into that other dimension, well, I was there. I think I was halfway there all the time. That's what the only explanation I can get to. Because one day I looked at the sun, and the next thing I could see it in its real natural form. Flames jutting out from this huge, big, whatever you call the sun, a planet or whatever it is. So I was like maybe a mile away from it or something, not hundreds of miles like we are. Then I had another experience where I had this miniature TV scene in the third eye area in the middle of my forehead, about that size. I forget about that size, a TV
Right.
screen of about 12 or 20 women, can't remember how many women, were all standing outside this building. I knew it was one of these big New York political places, and we were being photographed. But if you can imagine the size of the women in that dimension, I could still see their eyelashes moving, and so I've never seen anything like it in my whole life.
Oh, neat. So
Unbelievable
the whole
experience.
the whole television screen is only a couple inches
Yeah,
square, and yet you can see all 20 women, as if you're only a foot away from them.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And the eyelashes moving, this is what to this day I'm still astonished. And the lips moving when they were talking, but I couldn't hear anything.
Just a little break from the program to mention a couple of things. Firstly, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm to find more people who would enjoy these interviews. Also, if you're interested in spiritual growth, you might be interested in my series of spiritual books. As a spiritual author and a former band director, I use my little "the band director" trademark in these books because I use music as a metaphor for life and the journey of becoming a musician as a metaphor for our spiritual journey. There are 3 books in the series. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is a book of modern-day parables inspired by events from my teaching career. When you're working with kids, little things naturally come up that we sometimes call teachable moments. Little events when you realize there's a bigger lesson happening right now than the alternate F-sharp fingering on the clarinet that I was trying to teach. I started writing some of these little stories down and turning them into modern-day parables. So, the Band Director's Lessons About Life has 50 little parables. It's a bit like a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Each parable is about 3 pages long. Each begins with a story that happened in school, and then there's a reflection section that draws a spiritual lesson out of the events of the story. That is, it explains the spiritual metaphor. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is easy to read, makes a great gift, and expresses many universal spiritual principles in an easy to understand way. If you want to go deeper in your spiritual growth, I've also published a study guide to accompany the Book of Parables. It turns the band director's lessons about life into a year-long course in spiritual development. You will spend a week on each of the 50 parables. There is a deeper teaching about the meaning of each parable, reflection and discussion questions, especially helpful if you would like to use the study guide in a group setting, and a different meditation for each lesson. The third book in the series is a little book titled The Band Director's Pocket Guide to Spiritual Growth. This little book explains a simple 3-step process to putting your spiritual growth into high gear. You can learn more about all of these 3 books and my other books at my website, www.cominghomespirit.com. Because, after all of us are on a spiritual journey back home to God. So that's cominghomespirit.com. You can also go directly to my Shopify page at cominghomespirit.myshopify.com, where you can purchase my books directly from me. I can deliver ebooks and audiobooks anywhere in the world, but at the moment I can only ship paperback books within the continental United States. So if you live in other countries, you will need to purchase my books through Amazon in your own country. If you're enjoying this podcast, I really think you'll enjoy my Band Director series of books as well. Now, back to the program.
Then I went on to having lots of past life experiences, and I saw people, one particular person in the Stone Age that I knew in this life was a family member, and
Right.
then I went back to Egypt, and that just had one experience after another. I also had the experience that I was shot in Africa at the time of the Boer War, and the famous Ian Stevenson of Virginia University was the one who regressed me to that life eventually so that I could clarify, did this really happen? And when he asked me how I felt at my death, I just said my head fell down, which is exactly what, 12 bullets coming into your chest, that's what would happen. Your head would fall down, especially when you're tied to a post. I was an activist in the Boer War, and so that's why I was shot. But to find out about that eventually, then clarified that, I wasn't off my rocker. Like some people thought I was.
So he was able to trace back through historical records and found that there really was a person. Did you
Yes.
know your name? That's a big help to try to find historical records.
No, unfortunately, no, because we didn't. I was supposed to see him further, but he had to go back to California
Right.
or
So,
Virginia.
but he was able to find somebody who kind of matched your
Yes,
description and died in this way. Okay,
yeah.
that's fascinating.
My father was a Dutch general. My then father at the Boer War was a Dutch general. So, and then I lost a lot of information about it through traveling and everything else. Was always trying to find myself, But I guess probably, I mean, I researched theology and for years and years and years, partly due to the fact that I didn't know anything about anything that I had ever been taught. I didn't know
Right.
anything, and I needed to learn. And then a spiritualist man came into my life and wanted to help me. And he said, Jessica, just go to the library and start going to the research room, start studying. You'll help your brain, which he was totally right. The exercise to my brain helped me a great deal. That's how I was able to write 2 books. My memoir, From Tragic to Triumph, and then a story about all my spiritual investigation of the church and everything else. And
Right.
so the librarian, when I first went into the first library, librarian said, "What do you want to research?" And that people knew something was wrong with me, the way I spoke and my gesticulations and everything. And so she called me dear. She said, "What is it you want to research, dear?" So I had no idea. I just told her I was told to go into the research room.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, you must know what you want to research." And out came the word without my thinking it was from me. like came some I know it came from somewhere else. God. I knew nothing about God. And why would that word that just came through me, like I believe all art does come anyway through people. And so then my research lasted for 20 years, but
Right.
mostly because of the fact that I had met a 90-year-old canon of the Roman Catholic Church who was retired and who knew that I was doing research, and yet he didn't mind divulging things to me that he wasn't allowed divulged to his congregation. He actually told me secrets, and I have printed them in my book, A Spiritual Awakening in Search of Hidden Jewels. Now, some readers say they're going to get you, the Vatican, Jessica, they're going to get you for this. But I don't think today, I don't know if you agree with that. There's too many books now, about theology and misrepresentation of the Bible and everything else.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder for them to kill all of us who are catching
I
on to
know,
them.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And
But I mean, what
by the time you get as much white hair as us, Jessica, you know what? The threat of being killed, it doesn't really matter much anymore.
Yeah, really. Well, if nothing else, if they're in opposition, we'd sell more books.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That's right.
roll on there, Popey.
Yeah.
Have a
Yeah,
go.
make a big deal out of it. Publicly criticize me. Like they say in Hollywood, all publicity is good publicity. I mean,
Yeah.
Dan Brown wrote that famous book, the Da Vinci Code,
Oh, wonderful.
right?
I loved it.
And
And the film.
yeah, with the story about Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene and having children and the descendants and all this kind of stuff. Well, that just kind of horrified Christians, and there was such a public outcry against it. It turned it into one of the best-selling books of all time.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how it
So
works.
I can't even remember how many tens of millions of copies he sold. I mean, but yeah, great.
Yeah. And of course, the movie is incredible.
Yeah,
All his movies. But, I mean, he was just delightful. I just fell in love with this 90-year-old Roman Catholic. And here's me brought up a Protestant in Ireland. Can you believe this? Because I was researching in Ireland at the time. That was like I was traveling from one place to another. I went back to Ireland to see if I could find who I was, but I never found the old Jessica. So
yeah,
I don't care about that because I'm quite happy with the new Jessica, even with the memory impairment
yeah,
because of my
yeah,
spiritual knowledge, things
yeah,
that I was taught that people aren't taught unless they start researching themselves.
yeah.
Ancient
Well, just
theology.
just so that we can be a little bit salacious here in our interview, Jessica, can you share one or two of these secret things that the
Well,
old
number
priest told
one,
you?
there should never have been a pope. That's all false dogma. And I put the reason in my book. I want people to buy that book, A Spiritual Awakening, Search of Hidden Jewels, because the response I'm getting is that people are saying it gives them a new prospect on life in general. Total new prospect in life. And it's spreading that word that's important to me, like obviously yours are to you as well. But one of the things I found out was that the Vatican have got a term for reincarnation. Now, they don't profess that, they don't teach it, but yes, they have their term is metempsychosis, METEMPSYCHOSIS. And then he told me the meaning of that is the passing of the soul from one body to another body. So why would they have this? I I don't know if it was because they were so influenced way back in 400 AD and 500 by that Emperor Justinian, who put out curses to people if they believed in reincarnation. And I have
Yeah,
actually all his curses in my book, Spiritual Awakening, as well. And one of them was with the belief in reincarnation. So then did the priest follow up on what he said? And then it's never changed since.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
if they
I
have
I
this
think
name
I'm
for it. Sorry.
yeah, and that used kind of Greek words to make it unintelligible to ordinary people. But yeah, I mean, the history is sort of like they say, history is written by the victors, and so the history of the Catholic Church changed dramatically in 325 with the Emperor.
Constantine.
Constantine, thank you very much. The Emperor Constantine, who, first of all, it had been illegal to be a Christian, right? It was outlawed. So he's stopped Christianity being outlawed. And then a few years later, he made Christianity a state religion. And historians for centuries and centuries have said, oh, this was a great benefit to Christianity. Actually, it was a great detriment to Christianity because, what Constantine wanted to do was he wanted to, as all rulers want to do, rulers see religion as a tool of power. So he wanted
Yes.
to use religion to bolster the power of the state. And that's what the old Roman religion had done for centuries and centuries. But hardly anybody believed in the old Roman religion anymore. So it had stopped having that unifying influence within the empire. So what Constantine wanted to do was to use Christianity because there's so many Christians in the empire by that time. He wanted Christianity to become the new state religion, and he made it a state religion to provide a unifying influence. And he was the first one to, sit the bishops down and say, okay, you guys got to agree. You got to stop bickering amongst yourselves, and you got to agree on, what it is you believe. And so that's where the first creed comes from, the Nicaea, the Creed of Nicaea, right, coming out of the Council of Nicaea that was convened by the Emperor Constantine.
Yeah.
And then, about 50 years later or so later in the 4th century, it was Justinian who really got harsh and ordered the burning of all of the sacred texts that were not approved by, the new theology of the church that would be supportive of the empire. Right. So
Yeah.
you
It was
want to
all
have, yeah. And
politics.
anyway, we don't need to get into all that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
Christianity
I've
got,
written all that in my book anyway, but it
yeah,
was all politics. It was, they wanted to win over the pagans who had their own, if you want to call it a religion or thought, spiritual thought, and they wanted an army. I mean, those emperors back then wanted to rule the world. So the more people that they could get, enforce Christianity, they're going to be our members. That's
yeah.
our army. So that was really sad. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and which I have expressed a lot about again in the spiritual awakening, is the canon sharing of the Vulgate Bible of 400 AD. I talked to people for years about this, but nobody knows. They have no idea. Not one person had ever heard of the Vulgate. And then I
Really,
established from
because
him, because only priests were allowed to read it. It was not allowed, the public couldn't get access to this. And in that Bible are 52 chapters called Ecclesiasticus, and reincarnation is in there. I mean, Jesus spoke about reincarnation all of the time. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic scriptures. They're the books that have all the truth about Jesus's words. And now they've found St. Thomas's words are contrary to the other. Probably know that from the Nag Hammadi material.
yes, yeah.
The truth is coming out. It's just wonderful. But, Ecclesiasticus has now been taken out of all modern Bibles. That whole 52 chapters have gone out of it. And, I don't know what your thoughts are. Why do you think they would stop this, people believing in reincarnation? Is that a power, their own power, their priest power? Do you think that's what it's all about?
Yes, you see that when your focus is on power, right? They need it, and it's not just Christianity. This happens in all religions. They become perverted over time, and a priesthood develops, and the priesthood, the business model of every priesthood is to be the intermediary between the people and God, right? And
Yeah.
so, but that's not what Jesus taught, right? Jesus didn't establish the priesthood at all. And so, yeah, the priests want the people to be dependent upon them. And
Yes.
that's, in a sense, you can extrapolate that. That's what our governments are doing today. They want people to be dependent upon the government. And once you're dependent, you're basically a slave, right? To
Yeah.
be free, you must be independent. And so, the freeing spiritual truth is that we don't need an intermediary between us and God, right? God, God is within every one of us. And,
You are all God.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's about power. And that's why they didn't want people reading the Bible themselves. You don't want people to have that knowledge. That would give them independence. That would give them back their own power. You want to take people's power away from them and make them dependent upon you.
Wouldn't you think, okay, all those years ago, they thought people were not intelligent enough to understand anything? Because I actually interviewed a man who played golf with Vatican officials, and he was like you and me and into the truth of reincarnation and all the rest of it. And he asked the person he was playing golf with, that representative of the church, or Vatican actually, why are you holding all this back? And you know what their answer was? That they're not intelligent enough to understand. So maybe
Yeah.
that was, 1,500 years ago. But what about people today, whose intelligence are heightened and consciousness has heightened in all those years? Why don't they change their mind today? I don't understand it.
Oh, because I don't think it has anything to do with the century we're in. I think it has entirely to do with the attitude of elites of all the time. Elites of, 400 AD and elites of 2000 AD, they think the same. They think that they're special, that they're in a different class, and that ordinary people just can't understand what they understand. And yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling. Even after especially after all my research, and I spent years studying Bibles as well. In that canon went over early Bibles. He went over the Latin, well, before Latin, the Greek, Hebrew, and everything else, and pointed out discrepancies. What
yeah,
he was doing, some of my readers were friends, say, Jessica, you know what that man was doing? He was confessing to you. Because he knew at 90, he didn't know how many years he'd left, and he wanted to sleep nights having told somebody the truth that he was never allowed to speak to people.
yeah,
I mean, I've got the description about why the why there should never have been a pope. Everything that he told me in that book of Spiritual Awakening, and it is mind-boggling, totally mind-boggling. And but that journey led me to establish that Western education is limited in the field of spirituality and metaphysical studies. I think it should be taught at school. Children should be taught at school, not organized religious dogma, but that they are one with the universe, because that's what all my years of 20 years led me to believe. I started thinking like the religion dynamism. You might have heard of it, where those people, an ancient religion, again, and I don't know what I haven't researched it even to this day, if they were killed off, these people, or what, but they believed in that rocks, trees, rivers, animals, and even the earth itself carries vibrational power and spiritual energy. That's like many indigenous people have the same tradition. And that led me to studying vibrational frequencies in humans and all life on planet. I mean, the universe is alive.
yes,
The universe is alive, so therefore the universe has got to have vibrational frequency,
yeah,
power, tremendous power. And like even Oprah says, as far as she's concerned, the word God comes from the universe, that the universe is God, she believes. And Oprah's got many followers around the world who would listen to
mhm,
her. And that's the conclusion I came to as well when I was studying vibrational frequency energy of animals and vegetables and humans. I studied all of that. And that vibrational frequency it's even been measured, as you know, in humans.
yes,
Like when we meditate, the increase of vibration is incredible when we
yes,
meditate. I just learned that we're all connected, everyone, we're all connected in that universal consciousness. It actually unites us all, and that's where the expression we are all one. I
yes,
actually call this God consciousness. That's the
yep,
terminology that I use in my book. And Carl Gruber, I don't know if you've heard of him, I like what he says. He says, we are not in the universe, we are the universe, that it's all
that's
part
nice.
of us. And that's probably why Shirley MacLaine declared in a Malibu beach, I am God. She knew that herself with all of she
Yeah,
did many, many. years of research. But at
That
the same
earlier
time, sorry,
that earlier quote reminds me of a nice perspective that we are not a drop in the ocean. We are the
we are
ocean
the
in a
ocean.
drop.
Yes, I know that's a quote that I love as well. Yeah, but everybody carries there's the different vibrational frequency is according to our degree of power, ourselves, self power.
Yes.
And of all things I found in that old Bible, Paul talking about that. Now, he called it of the spirit, not, he didn't use the words vibration or frequency, he called it spirit. And he actually said to one, it is raised in one higher in somebody who's reading a language they never learnt in their life. The degrees of, to a clairvoyant, a certain degree. So I say from ants, from the small little ant, there's intelligence as well as the vibrational frequency
Yes.
going up the scale all the way to humans, from all life, the trees and all life. How do plants know when to blossom? How do they know? How does a tree know? There's a beautiful story actually written about a tree in Egypt where some animals were biting off their leaves and the tree got angry and emitted this awful odor stuff on the leaves. So when the animals came, and that was all done scientifically researched, they came and they sniffed at it and they wouldn't touch it. And then the adjoining tree put out the same, smell onto their leaves so that they were saved from it.
Right.
I mean, everything has intelligence. Every single thing has intelligence. The truth of it all is that we're not separate from the universe. We are expressions of it. We are connected to each other, to nature, to consciousness itself, to a greater spiritual reality that humanity has been trying to understand since the beginning of time. There's no doubt about it. And, people are starting to understand more about their soul and why we have a soul for reincarnational purpose. Otherwise, why the heck would we have a soul? There has to be some good reason for it. And then I found from that clergyman again, that lovely canon, we spoke about Pope Gregory the First, who is they didn't classify him as a pope, yet he was a pope. Their documentation is that he was Saint Gregory, but he was an actual pope. Gregory the First, and he spoke about the soul, saying that it must be healed and purified, and if it's not accomplished in that earthly life, it may continue in future lives. Don't you think that there should be more done by the Vatican in terms of, revealing more of the truth? I know we talked about that before, but
Well, I think the church has painted itself into a corner after 2,000 years of orthodox theology. It's so difficult that I think it's impossible for the leaders of any of the Christian churches to say, "My goodness, guys, we got it very wrong. We've been very
yeah,
wrong all of this time." Yeah, I think that that level of humility is simply we're not going to see that. I
you
think
think
what we're
not?
going to see, and what I've heard other people who prognosticate about the future say that gradually the organized religion is going to more and more decline, and people are going to take back their own responsibility and power for their own spiritual growth and for their own relationship with the divine or with God.
Yeah, and people are definitely more open-minded today. I watch movies brought up in show business as a child, and having been a child stage actor, show business stays in your blood. You never lose it. And I'm a movie buff. So every night my switch off is movies and documentaries, mostly movies. And now I notice they don't use the word God anymore. They're using the universe to replace the word God. I mean,
Yeah, which people are using other
that's
words. I think the universe is even a worse term because the word universe is, has a very material meaning. And so, yeah, I don't think that's an improvement to try to give a completely different meaning to, a common word that already has a clear meaning. It just, it's not the best way to go. But what word do you use?
maybe it's that the
Excuse me.
people, because now the books are out about the Essenes, those scriptures that were found
Yes.
years and years and years ago, and the Gnostic scriptures, people are reading about them now and understanding that there is something alternative to the dogmas that they've been taught in religion. Think maybe it's that people themselves are becoming more open-minded and many to even understand a lot of the truths now, that maybe it's the people that's going to change everything and
Oh,
they
yes.
won't have any choice
Absolutely.
at the Vatican but to let the people say their thing.
Well, yeah, that's happening, right? As you say, that's happening more and more. I mean, the people who are interested in spiritual things, but I think more and more people are becoming interested in spiritual things. In
Yes.
my uh, my tours just before we hit record here, I mentioned that I toured across Canada both in 2023 and 2024 on long book and speaking tours, and I had quite a few people come up to me during those tours in various places in Canada and say things like, I've never been a religious person, never gone to church, but since COVID, it's made me start to think more about this kind of stuff about God, and I'm trying to learn more. So we're moving in the right direction. It's just very slow, painfully slow for those of us who want to move more quickly and become a more spiritual society.
Yeah. And people in general, I believe that they are. There's an awful lot of people. One of well, not a guru, spiritual man that I was taught about was Satya Sai Baba in India. Have you ever heard of him?
Can you say his name again, please?
Satya Sai Baba. Even
I don't think
movie
I recognize that
stars,
name.
journalists, movie stars, you name it, went out to his ashram in India. See, that's kept back from the public as well. And that man existed, and a beautiful priest I corresponded with who worked at the Vatican went out to India to interview that man, Sai Baba, for 12 years of his life. He went out to interview him. And he actually wrote a book, A Catholic Priest Meets Sai Baba. And what happened was when he wrote the book, he took it to the Vatican. And because he compared him to Jesus, I need the word, he lost his job.
They fired him?
Yeah, they fired him. Excommunicated. It's come to the head. They
Excommunicated even.
excommunicated him because he dared compare this. This man raised the dead. I had two friends. I couldn't go to India myself. I had two friends who went out to do the investigations themselves, and they saw him raise the dead at one time. Another time, millions of people from all over the world, from every country, went to his ashram in India and the southwest of India to listen to what he had to say. And he did miraculous things as well. He would like put a lady would he'd ask a lady to give him her ring off her finger, and then he would just do this and change the form of that ring, and yet it would still fit her finger. Like a whole pile. That's just one of the things that he he did, one after another. And
Wow.
so why aren't the public should know more about him as well and what he did? And he was a man who had three incarnations, where again I equate that to the vibrational frequency of the individual.
Right.
And the higher the frequency, we go to the God consciousness frequency, right? And that's what I'm saying.
Right.
And that's my research has led me to believe that God consciousness frequency, that's what Jesus was on, and that's what Sai Baba was on.
Right.
So people need to raise their vibrational frequency, not necessarily to become another person like Baba or God, but for their own salvation and for their
Yes.
next future life as well.
Right. Well, and
But
and
then,
and for this life, I mean,
yeah,
to help us
and this life,
live
yeah,
our life right now, to improve our own relationships with the people around us, to get along better, and all the kind of things, to live as I say, to live more fully, more peacefully, more lovingly in this life. We do,
yeah.
there's some of the immediate blessings by raising our own frequency, raising our own consciousness to a higher level of spiritual understanding and spiritual expression.
Sometimes I wonder what frequency are government officials on? Do we still have wars?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. When you,
Yeah.
because of the fact that I had an injury and so many soldiers had injuries as well, was another thing investigated, looked into, what happens to them is dreadful. Committing suicide because they didn't know
Yeah.
anything about life. And I mean, I was suicidal for years.
Yeah.
But I devised a comedy. There's a lot of comedy in my story as well, by the way. It's not all "Ugh." And I would go to the window with my sleeping pills. I slept with barbiturates under my pillow for 7 years. But then I would go to the window in my kitchen. I'd say, "Jivas, your mother," that word. "I'm not taking them tonight." That was my comedy sketch that I did to keep me going. And I learned to swear from very famous jazz musicians in London, Soho Jazz Club, Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, by the way. Again, like Starman, I copied people. I copied women who wore long skirts and wore long dresses in the daytime, and show business people that I gelled with in London. They wore the hot pants and big long hair pieces, and, I copied them as well. There's quite a lot of comedy in my story. I try to
That's
get
absolutely what helps us get through life, right? If we can't see the humor in life, we become extremely depressed and bitter.
Yeah, and people laugh with me, not at me. When they're reading, for the first one, From Tragedy to Triumph, Reawakening My Broken Brain, they say they laughed and cried throughout the whole story. So there is humor there. Yeah.
So let's just kind of touch on and clarify your two books. So the first one is your memoir, From Tragedy to Triumph. And when did you publish
Reawakening
that
My
book?
Broken Brain.
Okay. When did you publish that one, Jessica?
I've been republishing over years since 1992. But now this new version was just published last year.
Okay, wonderful. And then your spiritual book. Can you?
Yeah, that was last year.
No, it's just a year ago. Awesome. That's great. So what is the title of that again?
A Spiritual Awakening in Search of Hidden Jewels. I refer to the hidden jewels as the documentation that I found, not just from the clergyman, but from my own research of, old literature, the falsification of those, the truth of those.
Right. Well, that sounds very interesting to me because I'm interested in anything spiritual, and I don't have enough time or energy to read all the things I'd like to read. I buy books faster than I can read them, and sometimes I slap myself on the wrist, say, "Okay, don't buy any more books until you finish reading some of the ones you've already got."
I know that story.
Yeah, your spiritual book definitely interests me. So where can people pick up your books?
My website is jessicaetaylor.org, and both books are on my website, and they can go straight to my website and get it. Or they just go to Amazon, because Amazon published it for me.
Right.
Amazon's my publisher.
Right. Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, I'll definitely put those links in the show notes as well. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight to talk with you today, Jessica, and hear your story and hear your insights and your story of spiritual growth and development and study. It's similar to a path that I'm on and that many of us are on in the world, trying to deepen our spiritual understanding, raise our consciousness, raise our vibration, spread love around the world and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for being such a shining light on the path, and I hope your light, Jessica, will illuminate the path for many others.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. That's all I want out of this. That's why I say From Tragedy to Triumph, because, there is a triumphant ending with all this research that I did, and being capable of writing that book, A Spiritual Awakening, which is very difficult. And you can imagine how difficult it was for somebody with a brain injury. But I know I had spiritual help. I know that. I believe our guides help us through those. I think all art comes through us.
Yes.
Comes through us.
Yes. Yeah. All creativity. It's something we tap into, and we allow ourselves to be channels for it to come into the material world. Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much, Jessica. All the best to you in the future.
And you too, dear. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.